In 1993, an indie rock album was born in a Chicago bedroom. Armed with just a 4-track recorder, raw honesty, and emotion, LIz Phair released her debut album, Exile and Guyville. It became one of the most groundbreaking records of the 90s indie scene. Phair's fearless lyrics and lo-fi sound made her an instant underground sensation and critical darling. But a decade later, everything seemed to change. She was older, divorced, and with a son, and on a new label who was more hits-oriented. In 2003, Phair released her 4th record, which was self-titled, which was a drastic departure for her. It resulted in one of the most vitriolic backlashes in music history. In today's video, let's talk about how LIz Phair dared to change and how the indie world, as well as critics and fans, refused to change with her. Phair's early albums were known for their unfiltered sexual lyrics. She became known as a fearless songwriter. Born in New Haven, Connecticut in 1967, she became a musician first in San Francisco and then moved back to Chicago, living with her parents. Chicago had recently given birth to groups like Smashing Pumpkins and Urge Overkill. She went out night after night, attending dive bars, meeting men, having her heart broken, as well as seeing indie bands. Phair's career in music began when she met guitarist Chris Brokaw. He was a member of the band Come. He was visiting her San Francisco roommate when he heard Phair's songs and encouraged her to record them. Phair eventually moved back to Chicago after running out of money and was living with her parents. Utilizing a guitar and a 4-track recorder in her bedroom, she wrote and recorded songs about sex, heartbreak, anger, as well as independence. These recordings turned into Exile and Guyville, a feminist rebuttal to the Rolling Stones' 1972 album Exile on Main Street. Hiding behind the moniker Girly Sound, her tapes soon circulated amongst college radio disc jockeys and eventually found their way to a guy named Gerard Cosloy, who was the then co-president of Matador Records. Cosloy was intrigued by a review of Girly Sounds he had read in the fanzine Chemical Imbalance and offered Phair a $3,000 advance to release her songs. Cosloy recalled, "The songs were amazing. It was a fairly primitive recording, especially compared to the resulting album. The songs were really smart, really funny, and really harrowing, sometimes all at the same time." This led to the album Exile and Guyville. Phair told an interviewer that as far back as her first album, she was paralyzed by fear and anxiety about wanting to make it, but she didn't have a guiding hand showing her how to do it. She also hated her voice despite those around her enjoying it, remarking to Rolling Stone, "I have such a nasal, mumbly twang. It's what everybody else likes, but I hate hearing it." Phair's early albums feature simple melodies and were pretty limited in her vocal range, but her real strength came from her image and her incredible songwriting and storytelling abilities. Local producer Brad Wood was enamored with Girly Sound. He worked with Phair to produce the album, and everything was very minimal. There was no backing band. Everything you hear on her first record came from Phair herself, Wood, who played drums in the local scene, and guitarist engineer Casey Rice. Urge Overkill frontman Nash Cato actually took the cover photo for Liz Phair's debut album, which is actually her topless in a photo booth, with the final photo being tastefully cropped. It was Cato who also came up with the name Guyville to describe Chicago's indie scene. Exile, of course, is a reference to the iconic Rolling Stones album Exile on Main Street. While the Stones were fleeing taxes from the British government at a derelict French villa, Phair was fleeing a male-run and driven music scene in favor of being a solo female artist. On Exile and Guyville, Liz speaks from the perspective of a woman defined by her own desires and what men want from her. But that's not to say that the album was autobiographical, because in an interesting twist, it's not. She told an interviewer, "That stuff didn't happen to me, and that's what made writing it interesting. I wasn't connecting with my friends. I wasn't connecting with relationships. I was in love with people who couldn't care less about me. I was yearning to be part of a scene. I was in a posing kind of mode, yearning to have things happen for me that weren't happening. So I wanted to make it seem real and convincing."
What I did was I just took the Exile on Main Street album, like lyrically and just in terms of like arrangement, sequencing, and I answered it in my own way. Sometimes it was disagreement. I treated mixed lyrics as sort of my love object. You know, he was what the man was saying, and this is what I was coming back with. And it was just kind of like this little dance between the two albums, which it wasn't literally, well, this is my version, or this is the same thing only from a female point of view. I was talking. It was a dialogue between Phair.
The lyrics on Phair's debut record were often characterized by the press as being punk feminist and included explicit and unapologetic themes about sex and relationships. And this resonated deeply with listeners, especially young women. She told the New York Times that the album was the equivalent of seeing the girl next door go nuclear. Exile and Guyville became Matador Records' best-selling release at the time, selling about 200,000 copies in its first year, something that was almost unheard of for an independent album. Years later, it eventually was certified gold. The songs Never Said and Stratford on Guy received good play on MTV as well as college radio.
Never said nothing. Once I really listened to noise.
In addition to going gold, the record also made many best of lists for the year as well as the decade. The record cemented Phair's status as a groundbreaking voice in the alternative music scene. She was at the forefront of 90s music that saw female musicians like PJ Harvey, members of the Breeders, Hole, Alanis Morissette, and Bjork, in addition to the Riot Girl movement that was happening at the time. Following her iconic debut record, Phair released two more records over the next 4 years, 1994's Whip Smart and 1998's White Chocolate Space Egg. So Whip Smart did produce a single in Supernova, which landed in the top 10 on the alternative airplay chart, while White Chocolate Space Egg was not commercially successful, but it demonstrated a more mature and polished sound from the artist. In the mid-90s, Phair also got married and had a son, but by 2001 she was divorced. She soon moved to Los Angeles with her son, and it's insinuated in several interviews that LA was expensive and the musician now needed a steady paycheck to support a family. As a result, Phair wanted to go in a more popular direction, even remarking how she wanted to have a higher work-to-reward ratio as a musician. In essence, she wanted more money. While promoting her fourth album, Phair raised some eyebrows about how she felt early on in her career. She told the Kansas City Star, "Before I made Guyville, I made 2 Girly Sound tapes. A lot of that was bubblegummy and silly and very poppy. Anyone that has heard Girly Sound shouldn't be surprised by the new stuff." She added there was a natural pop lineage in her early works, including the track Never Said on Guyville, and then the subsequent releases Whip Smart with the track Supernova, as well as the title track, as well as Johnny Feelgood on White Chocolate Space Egg. Phair also claimed in 2003 that she didn't want to be an alternative queen or the anti-Madonna as some labeled her. She felt that it was bestowed upon her by the press, admitting that she's always been a fan of pop music. That's at least what she claimed. Almost 2 decades later, though, in 2021, she gave a different version of events. Her label Matador was acquired by Capitol Records in 1999, and as a result, there were more people for her to deal with, and Capitol was really all about pumping out hits. She told Stereogum in 2021, "It was just too many people. All that did was give me 12 more people I had to talk to on top of the people I was already talking to who had different names themselves. They were having disagreements. It was just too much." Matador soon left their agreement with Capitol, but Capitol retained Phair's contract. Suddenly, no one from Matador was left, and the head of Capitol told Phair, "I'm giving you a shot, and if you don't take the shot, there's nothing much I can do for you." Phair's self-titled fourth album went through a number of revisions. She initially collaborated with a variety of producers, including Michael Penn, Pete Yor, and Walt Vincent, and that resulted in several songs that ended up on her self-titled record. But the label wasn't satisfied with the results. Phair, in doing press for the album, claimed that one day she heard Avril Lavigne on the radio and decided that she wanted to work with the same producers, telling the Chicago Tribune, "I first heard Avril's song Complicated blasting from a car while I was walking around Manhattan Beach, then again blasting from another car a few days later, and I'm like, who the hell is that?" Adding, "I've always been obsessed with the idea of stuff I listened to on the radio, and I wanted to be what I experienced. The production team she was looking for was a group called The Matrix. They'd co-produced 5 of the songs on Levine's 2002 record Let Go, 3 of which were massive hits, including being top 10 singles on the Billboard Hot 100 chart. These included the songs Complicated, Skater Boy, and I'm With You. They also produced the Hilary Duff hit So Yesterday, which was popular around this time. The success of their work with Levine and Duff resulted in the trio being highly sought after, and they also went on to work with Britney Spears, Shakira, as well as Korn. The Matrix co-produced and co-wrote 4 of the songs on Phair's 4th album, including the breakout hit Why Can't I, which peaked at number 32 on the Hot 100 chart, and number 7 and 10 on the Adult Pop Airplay chart and the Pop Airplay chart. The Matrix also worked on the other hit on the same album, Extraordinary, which peaked at number 14 and 28 on the Adult Pop Airplay and Pop Airplay charts. Phair's 4th album saw a 2003 release, with it peaking at number 27 on the charts in America, her highest charting album of her career. But the record was more poppy and carried a lot more polish, standing in stark contrast to her past works. Phair told the Kansas City Star, "I have several motivations. I'm really sick of people complaining about what's on the radio who aren't willing to get on the radio. If I can get one song on the radio, it might inspire others to get a song on the radio. Nothing will change if you stand outside and shake your fist." She went on to add that it's this kind of attitude that results in artists not being able to learn about the music business, and that there are things you can do to sell more records that aren't so distasteful. There are ways of doing it without selling yourself to the devil. As for her longtime fans, she pointed to the song Little Digger as proof that she hadn't completely abandoned her old style. The track was written from the perspective of her 6-year-old son, who is now dealing with her mom being with men other than his dad.
Does it mean when something changes how it's always been?
In doing press for the album, Phair told interviewers that she was bracing for a backlash from critics as well as fans. But she admitted later on she was surprised at just how much vitriol was spewed her way. The record was lambasted for a number of reasons, including Phair being considered too old to release a pop record. She was 36 at the time. People had issues with it being too overproduced, as well as containing superficial lyrics. The Guardian went as far as calling her album cover, and I quote, "not a pretty sight, demonstrating the harsh standards that women faced in the industry."
Here we go, we're at the beginning. We have chat, but my head's spinning.
The lyrics were written from Phair's own life circumstances, a woman now in her 30s dealing with infidelity, relationships, as well as, of course, raising a child. The album became one of the most controversial releases of her career, sparking intense criticism and debate in the music industry. The San Francisco Chronicle remarked that the album was going to alienate most of her fan base, while The Guardian wrote the record was going to go down as one of the music's most unexpected, embarrassing, and disappointing reinventions. Phair's longtime fans considered the album a train wreck as well. New York Times writer Megan O'Rourke, in her review, titled it "LIz Phair's Exile in Avrillville," commenting that Phair had committed an embarrassing form of career suicide, adding, "Miss Phair often sounds desperate or clueless," going on to add that Phair was in the same frame of mind as a middle-aged man going through a midlife crisis and buying a Corvette. Ouch. Phair ended up responding to the New York Times, writing a lengthy, rambling letter that didn't mention the review or the album and represented O'Rourke as a person who thought the sky was falling. Phair remarked, "I wanted her to experience what it's like to be misrepresented in the press," adding, "Megan ought to try wearing some hot clothes and having a good time. She might be happier." Pitchfork's Matt LeMay infamously gave the record a 0.0 rating, specifically criticizing Phair's attempts at writing pop music. Phair joined an unfortunate club of one of 4 albums Pitchfork had given 0.0s to, with the other artists including The Flaming Lips, Sonic Youth, and Jet. But not every review was negative. Chuck Campbell of the Knoxville News Sentinel said in his 2003 review that, and I quote, "The album crackles with hook-filled diversity that only occasionally stumbles." But it seems like some people have had a change of heart in the years since the album's come out. Years later, Matt LeMay apologized for his 0.0 rating during his time he was a writer at Pitchfork. Phair responded to LeMay on Twitter, writing, "I've always enjoyed criticism well rendered, and that 0.0 has some humor to it. Enjoyed it more than others, I can tell you." Phair's follow-up album, 2005, Somebody's Miracle, it was her last with Capitol Records. Soon afterwards, Liz Phair went on to write more commercial music, including the theme song for the CW show The 100. When her and her writing partner would experiment with different music for the show, they'd call the samples Fun Style, which inspired her truly bizarre 2010 album, which she came up with after parting ways with her management. But that's a story for another time. That does it for today's video, guys. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again on Rock Culture Stories. Take care.